Morning, everybody. This video was put together to go over form boards and the next phase of construction. Last time we did piles, pile layout, survey, etc. This week we're going to continue on to what happens next. There's a lot of things we're going to have to explain after the video, which I think we've got the paperwork to show. So let's watch the video and then we'll have a talk.
I'm Devin with RWB Construction Management. And now that we're done with our auger piles, we're going to go into the form boards and the MEP underground. That's mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And in this case, we actually have a 2,000-gallon fish tank going in. So we have to install those pipes in the underground as well. First thing we would start with for our form boards is going to be these 2x4s over here, which is actually called a batter board. All right, here we have our batter board, and these are located by the surveyors. RWB and the shell contractor decide exactly where they want these around the site. We have several of them. And once they're located by the surveyor, the shell contractor comes out, builds these, and pinpoints exactly where the surveyor put his mark. Then we put the nails in and we tie our string lines from this one to the next one, and that gives us our straight lines, east, west, north, south, and also make sure that we have our 90-degree angles, and most importantly, puts the house exactly where it's supposed to be on the property so we don't have any issues there. All right, here we have our string line that's tied to our batter boards, and then we have the form board below it. The form boards actually come in pre-assembled to various lengths, and many times they'll just fill in little sections as they need. Once it's plumb and level to the string line, then they'll take their stakes and put their stakes in, and they'll add this kicker in. The kicker is important because there's a lot of weight and pressure from the concrete pushing against these form boards, and the worst thing you could have during a pour is a failure in a form board, which then causes a blowout, and now you have to scramble to repair that quickly to continue pouring and finish your slab pour. All right, you'll see these straps all over the job site. These actually are stainless steel straps that hold up the pipes in the event that either you had a washout or the grade starts to drop a little bit underneath the house and the pipes start floating. They're actually suspended and held by these. The plumbing by code has to be a lot closer together to keep their pitch compared to the electrical, and so that's why you'll see on the white pipes, which are the plumbing, you'll see them a lot closer together, and on the gray pipe, the conduit for the wires, that's electrical. All right, as I mentioned before, we have a 2,000-gallon fish tank going into this house, and so this is the underground for that. We always try to run spare lines for something like this because they may need extra water flow, or maybe one of the pipes gets damaged during the construction process, and that way we have what we need without having to rip up the floor of the house.
Okay, so a couple of things to start with. One, although it shows the batter boards, it shows where they go, how they work, etc. They haven't really explained to you how they got there, okay, or what this dimension is. You're going to have to do this. You're going to have to give a drawing or locations to the surveyor so he can locate the points you're looking for, okay? You look in front of you, you'll see a couple of things. You'll see one that looks like this, right? And you'll see a drawing that looks like this, okay? These two were developed to do just that, to locate the pinpoints of those batter boards. This one was developed by the sub, and it will not work. And I'll explain why. When you put the points, you have to give the points to the survey you want, okay? Those points represent a dimension off the building, whether it's a 3-foot offset or a 4-foot offset, something that's going to let them locate the corner of the building, a specific wall, a layout, something, so that when they put the string line that Devin mentioned, they know that the form board is a distance off of that. Sometimes people put it right on it. I like to put it off of it so that when they're doing excavation, when they're getting everything lined up, they don't ruin the banter board. That way you can always go back and reference it. This one, if you look at it, there's two things wrong with this. One, it doesn't really give you an offset anywhere, okay? It also represents lines that are straight that aren't straight in reality, okay? This one, which we put together, gives you an offset from the building, an offset north, and from these layouts, you can pull your strings and get all the dimensions on the site. If you have the dimension of one wall, and you know that's the front wall, you know what's parallel to that. You know from the drawing provided by the engineer, the dimensions within the building that let you lay out the rest of the walls. So the first thing is you got to make sure that the drawing you're giving the surveyor allows you to pull the rest of the dimensions you need for the house. If you miss one, and he's got no way of going back, you're going to call him back, okay? The second thing is the surveyor needs a CAD drawing. He needs to know where 3 foot is or what you want. He can't do it from this, okay? CAD or whatever program they're using is digital. He needs to get the points from that, overlay it on the plan, and that's how he comes out with absolute points to go by, okay? So without those points and without this drawing, he can't give you the points to lay your banter boards out. Your batter boards, that's what state you live in. So this is important. This is the first step. We always said you got to think ahead, okay? Part of thinking ahead means knowing what you have to give the surveyor so he can give you what you need, okay? This is something you should coordinate with your shell contractor and make sure he has dimensions. Within the plan, there is this plan. Okay, and this plan gives you dimensions within the layout. Whatever you don't have here, you either have to go back to the engineer, or if you have CAD, you can look it up on the CAD file. Okay, we use CAD a lot. Okay, but from all this, you have to get these dimensions. While you're laying this out, cross-reference the architectural plan, because sometimes there's a conflict, and if it is, you have to resolve what the conflict is before you go any further, or you might catch that one floor up when something doesn't line up, or there's a beam that's drawn wrong or something. It happens all the time, okay? So laying out for the banter boards and everything are important. When you're done and you have your frame up, you're railed all the way around, you'll call for a form board survey. Okay, the survey will come back and he'll locate the form board just like he located the points digitally. They'll provide you with this drawing. Okay? This is a layout of the form that was put in. What I like to do is have the surveyor take that form and overlay it on the CAD file for the site plan for two reasons. One, to make sure it fits where it's supposed to fit. And the other thing is to make sure it's in the right place. If you put this together and the whole thing is over a foot, you know something's wrong, right? If they overlay the plan on the site plan and the walls don't line up, you know something's wrong. But more importantly, from this, you can look to make sure your offset from the side of the property line is right. This is the time to catch it. If it comes in and it says you're 24 feet off the wall, off the property line, and you have a 25-foot setback, this is where you catch it. You don't catch it when the house is up and he comes out. This lets you fix it now. Okay? Do this early. Do this before you go too far, because at this point, you can fix it. Okay? Plus, after this, the subs, the MEPs, they're all going to take measurements off that form board. If that form board is wrong, all your measurements are going to be wrong. If the toilet is 6'8" off of that wall, and the wall's off by a foot, and then you change the wall, and everything you've put in the ground is wrong. So the form board early, as soon as you get it railed, get that form board in. Before you go digging before you go digging beams, before you run underground, before you do anything, put that form board survey in. Make sure it's right. Okay? But you got that?
What's the time frame from having the form board in that you have to get that drawing done before the next step occurs?
If you call them ahead of time to plan it, usually before the form board's done, if you know you've got another week on the form board, call them a week ahead. Get them there, because after they get it, they can usually turn that around in a couple of days. The problem is if you wait for the form board to be done and you call it and you say, hey, Brian, I need you here Friday. He's going to say, well, I'll see you a week from Friday. I'm booked. Okay? All the surveyors, they book ahead. Some of this stuff is not long lead time stuff. Okay? You can check your elevations. He's given you a point. If you ask him to, he'll check the elevation on the form board while he's there. That's fine. But if you call him the day before, it's not going to happen. Okay? This is a critical path business. Okay? Everything we do is A goes into B, goes into C, goes into D. You can't get to D until you finish A. On this project, we had a banyan tree that was in the way. And we had to get people in to get the riprap wall done so we could grade the back, so we could move the trees, so we could put the form. All that has to be in your planning, just like all the underground has to be in your planning.
Joey, how often are the architects and engineers wrong?
How often are they right? Is that what you said?
Well, it's a far easier question to answer than to say how often are they right. Explain why we need to double check this math. You guys, Joe can talk through this, but ultimately as the GC, it doesn't matter what's on the architectural drawings. It doesn't matter what's on the engineering drawings. If we put this thing, any house, whether it's 5,000 feet, 40,000 feet, a foot past the setback, that's on us. We're never going to get that back out of the surveyor. We're never going to get that back out of the architect, the engineer. It's going to be on us. So when you guys are setting this stuff up, we run that math 10 different ways to Sunday to make sure that where we're at is correct.
And you check overalls. Okay, you've got the plan. We've got that plan I showed you with all the dimensions within. Check the overall. Check end of building to end of building, end of building to end of building. Make sure your overalls are right. In this job, it was off by like 1/4 of an inch, which is amazing. Okay, but check it. You will find, in many cases, that the drawings don't line up. The architect missed something. There was a revision. He didn't catch something. When you're going back and you're looking at, for example, this has a sunken area where there's a hot tub and a cold plunge. Okay? The plumbing had to be in a certain place and it was off. You call the plumber back. You have him walk through. Don't be afraid to have your utility people come back and look. There's a coordination between architectural, MEP, structural, civil, landscape, thank you, all of them, okay? On this job, we had a problem with civil, landscape, and elevations on the civil, okay? Even the walls are being redrawn now because the elevations didn't work right with the grades, okay? If you find something, address it early. Don't wait till the end of the project and say, oh, we'll figure it out in time. Because what you change could affect what happens later in the job. With this job, we found the grades were wrong along the wall, okay? That banyan tree that we just paid a lot of money to move would have been at the wrong elevation and would have been at the wrong place had we not gone back and questioned the grades, okay? All this stuff is easy to deal with early. Once you put it in the ground, it gets real hard, okay? And everybody likes to do this when you point the finger and say, how come? You'll call the engineer, he'll tell you to call the landscape, he'll tell you to call the civil, he'll tell you to call the structural, he'll tell you back to call the architect, and we'll call you the landscape, and you'll go in a big circle. Eventually you put one of those beautiful emails out to everybody and you wait for the response because it's going to come, okay? Especially on a job that's moving fast. Okay? If you get a job where everybody's rushing to get these drawings in for permit and everybody's working to get done, and then they bring the designer in and he makes changes, and after the designer makes changes, those have to be incorporated into the architectural. It's a lot of coordination all at one time. People miss things, and sometimes you may be in the middle of that revision, and you have to look at what's going to be revised and how will it affect you, because what you're working on now, you won't see for another 3 weeks. Sometimes that requires an email. Hey, this is what I see coming. Is this what I should do? Okay? Also, learn from past experiences. Okay, we have a condition where we have a water stop at the bottom of the outside walls. Okay? In one job, they put it and blew out the outside wall. And I called the engineer, and the engineer said it was put there to stop water from getting through and hitting the first piece of rebar on the wall going up. I'm like, but if it pops, you're exposing the first piece of rebar. So in this case, we're putting it in the middle, and we're making sure the waterproofing passes the joint to make sure nothing gets in. These are all things you can do by looking at the drawing, talking to people who have done this before, getting correspondence from other jobs of things that have happened, and deal with them early.
Okay. Joe, that's a great point. You guys, it's something you need to remember. Even when the engineers and the architects are putting these details together, they don't necessarily work on all of our projects. So sometimes the engineer is drawing something, and it seems for his junior guy sitting at the desk in his CAD program, it seems like this is going to work, but you get in the real world and real world application, and it doesn't. There's a problem with it. It's okay at that point, and actually you should be looking at this, a little bit further out and forecasting it, but it's okay to pick up the phone like Joe did and talk to that structural engineer and say, hey guys, we've seen this be a problem for us in the past. This is what we're doing. This is how we're seeing it. It's just not going to work. Can you please come to the field? Can you give us a different detail? Can you work with us to better explain this?
And make sure they send you a confirmation of what you guys talked about.
Or send it for them and have them respond.
The one thing you also...
You should never do anything without written correspondence, ever, in this business.
Like we got a letter back saying, I approve the use of this with this, okay? We got that back, it's in record. The other thing is if you inform them, if you inform the engineer, we had this problem, he's not going to spec it that way on the next one. Usually, a lot of these engineers we have, they're repetitive. They're the same engineers on a bunch of jobs. A lot of the details are repetitive. If you go through these details instead of just addressing them locally, they'll fix them on future drawings and you won't have to deal with them again. Everybody got that?
Guys, also the form board survey, it's a requirement of the building department in every municipality that it be completed, signed, and sealed before you pour the slab. So that's why it's critical to schedule it ahead of time. Sometimes in private inspections, like we do here in Manalapan, we're allowed to present it after the fact, but every other building department, you have to have it or you cannot pour the slab.
When you go for your inspection, and we'll go into grade beams and more of that next week when you see the video, but when you go for your inspection, they're going to require, or they should or may require a lot. They'll require the structural drawings for review. They'll require this, which is a document provided by the pest control company that they've sprayed the soil underneath for termites. It's actually part of something you need for your CO inspection, okay? They'll, like Marion said, they'll request this. And they'll also request the engineer's report on the piles, signing off the piles. Say they've even met refusal or whatever and they're good, okay? Not everybody will ask for them, but many of them will. More of the private inspectors will, okay? Have it ready on site. It's big, when you go into the site and you get an inspection, the engineer walks in and you say, here's my form board survey, here's this, here's my plan. It shows a lot for your preparedness and our professionalism, okay? Because as the thing goes on, his impression of us is going to mean a lot for the next year when he's coming to look at everything else. It means you're attentive, you understand the policy, you're professional. Make sure when they come, you have everything. If you don't have it, call your assistant project manager. Let them print it out. Just make sure you have all this stuff on site. Most of this should be in the file. I know that when working with Sabrina, we've opened the file up for CO, and everything required for CO will be in that file, okay? All this is in preparedness for what comes next. Okay? Next week, we'll go over grade beams. We'll go over pile caps. We'll go over pours. The pour we have going Saturday is going to be 72 trucks. It's the biggest pour I've ever done. It's 720 yards. Okay? There's a lot of preparedness. There's going to the town, getting approvals to start early, getting approvals to work late, working out wash areas, getting an alternate site, having a shuttle because there's no room on site, getting the fence taken down, making sure nutting comes. We spoke last week about the canisters. You know,
Understanding that your shell contractor, especially the one we're using for that pour, is either 10% over or 10% under on every pour they call for.
okay? If you use this, the vendors we've used, we use CMEX. We have very good results with CMEX, especially with Penetron. If you're going for some other vendor, be careful, okay? Make sure you set up. Make sure that the hoses they're using are not 4-inch, they're 6 inches, because if they clog, you don't have time to clear them. Okay? Make sure they're not pumping, to Dan's point last week, make sure they're not throwing water through them to clean them out every shot. Now all your concrete's contaminated. All the stuff that we're talking about is in preparation up to the pour. Next week, next month, we'll go through grade beams, we'll go through waterproofing, we'll go through hydraulic bending of the rebar and not using a pipe. We'll go through all this, okay? All this is really important because on Saturday, when it's all these trucks showing up, you don't have time to say, oh man, I've missed something. You know, I mean, this week I've got all the subs coming in and checking all their lines one more time, okay? The last meeting for this site is today with the subs, and it's going to be intense, okay? Make sure of everything going on, you are totally versed in everything. Don't rely on the sub to figure it out for you. And make sure that you and he are on the same page. All right? Any questions?
So, Doug, on the form boards, would you address how critical that elevation is for FEMA floodplain elevation?
Okay, FEMA recently has gotten a lot more involved in what's going on. There's also a VRAIL survey, a certificate that needs to be added to the requirements for CO. When you have a floodplain, that's a flood zone that's really, really low, there are things that you're going to have to do, okay? There's elevations that you have to maintain with your electrical, okay? There are flood vents that you have to put in the walls. There's a whole critical plan for how you address if you're in a flood zone. Not even a flood zone, but depending on where your elevation, base flood elevation is.
Everything we do is in a flood zone.
Okay, base flood elevation is an elevation set by FEMA. The engineer will work with you saying if you're in an elevation, if your base flood elevation is at a certain height, you need flood vents in the floor, you need flood vents in the wall. You're going to have to get a certificate stating that walls are frangible as per plan that the engineer is going to have to put together. There are rules regarding base flood elevations. Electrical has to be 1 foot above a base flood line, which means if you're doing electrical panels like we did at 980, it was a little bit complicated. We had a base flood elevation that was like here, which meant 1 foot above that was the outlet. So the electrical panel couldn't start lower than there. So then the electrical panel's here, that puts the top breaker here. Then there's a rule that says how high the top breaker can be when you stand in front of it. So from there you go down. That's a platform we had to build. So all these calculations and things have to be done, and FEMA's becoming very alert to what is happening and what isn't. You're going to see it more and more on plans going forward. And it is getting attention now. Okay, like when we did was Jordy, when we took the bathroom out underneath the town hall, and all of a sudden the pipe below sunk 1.5 feet, and there was like a gap between the toilet and the pipe because these straps that Devin explained never used to be needed. So now the grade below the house sunk, took the pipe with it, and everything kind of floated through the air until it hit the pipe. It happens. All the stuff we do is because something happened. You know, FEMA's probably getting involved because somebody got sued, probably, right?
All right, guys.